Okay, so picture this. My daughter Sophie was going through a 13-hour spinal surgery, super intense, risky stuff, and get this, not a single person from my family called or even checked in, totally silent. And then 3 days later, my dad texts me asking for $5,000 for my brother's engagement party. Yeah, you heard that right. So, what do you think I did? Well, hold on, because what happens next? Let's just say it gets wild and you won't want to miss a second the hospital, right? It hits you the second you walk in. That smells sharp, chemical, sterile. It sticks to your clothes, your hair, even your thoughts. For 13 hours, that smell became my world. I sat in this hard, beige plastic chair in the pediatric orthopedics waiting room, my hands so clenched that my knuckles were white, just gripping the edge like it would somehow hold back the fear. Sophie, my 16-year-old, brave little fighter, was having a spinal fusion. Her scoliosis had gotten too aggressive, threatening her lungs. The surgery wasn't optional, and honestly, it was dangerous. There was a whole day ahead of me, and I was bracing myself for every second. I'd texted my family the night before, mom, dad, Colin, the whole family group chat. I typed it out, my fingers shaking even as I tried to steady them. Sophie's surgery is tomorrow at 6 a.m. It's a long one, 14 hours. Please keep her in your thoughts. I expected the usual responses. My mom, sending prayers and folded hands emojis. My dad, some perfunctory, let us know how it goes. And Colin, just a thumbs up reaction. Yeah, that was it. Nothing more. Okay, fine. I thought, I'll survive this alone if I have to. I got to the hospital at 4:38. Oh, just as they were wheeling Sophie through the double doors. Her eyes were wide, trying not to show the fear. But I saw it. I held her hand, feeling the warmth, the pulse, the tiny tremor in her fingers. I love you, Mom. See you in a bit, she whispered. And I said, my voice cracking, I love you more, sweetie. I'll be right here when you wake up. Right here. And then they closed the doors. The surgery light clicked on, and it began. I made my way to that beige chair, the one that was going to be my life for the next 13 hours. By 8 o'clock, the caffeine from my early coffee had long worn off. The dread had settled into my stomach, twisting like a tight knot. I checked my phone. Nothing. No messages. No texts. No calls. Just silence. By noon, hunger and nausea had joined the anxiety. I forced myself to walk to the cafeteria, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the air dry and buzzing. I stared at my phone, willing it to light up. A text from my mom finally came, asking for an update, finally. A call from Dad. Nothing. I bought a stale muffin, couldn't even eat it, and trudged back to my post. At 4 p.m., the sun started to angle through the high windows, throwing long, lonely shadows across the floor. My back ached. My eyes burned from staring at the same blurry landscape painting. I sent another message to the group chat at 1 p.m. Doctor just gave a midday update. Things are complicated, but she's stable. Still several hours to go. No replies, not even a thumbs up this time. Colin had checked out completely. And honestly, that hurt more than I expected. That simple lack of acknowledgement, that absence, it was deafening. Then, at 7:30 p.m., a surgeon walked in, blue scrubs, mask hanging around his neck, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He looked at me, the only person left in that waiting room, and said, Alexandra, for Sophie. I shot up, my heart lurching. Yes, is she okay? And he said, she's okay. Just that. But somehow, all the air I hadn't realized I'd been holding escaped in a sob. 13 hours, and she was okay. He explained it was a complex procedure, that the curve had been worse than imaging suggested, but she was strong and stable in recovery. I collapsed back into the chair, tears streaming down, a mix of relief, exhaustion, and pure, gut-wrenching emotion. I grabbed my phone to update my family. My hands were shaking as I typed, "She's out. 13 hours. It was hard, but she's in recovery. She's okay." Thank God. I hit send and then waited, scrolling through social media. I saw it. My mom had posted a picture of a rose from her garden. Colin had posted a selfie with his new fiancée at some rooftop bar, fancy drinks in hand, clinking glasses, captions about the future and success. Just 20 minutes from the hospital, less than 20 minutes away. And no one had checked in on Sophie, my daughter, who had just survived major surgery. Not a text, not a call. I felt this cold, sharp clarity. The waiting room that had felt like a purgatory now felt like a tomb. Their silence screamed louder than any alarm ever could. When the nurse finally called my name to go to the post-op unit, I walked down the hall alone, scrubbed my hands, put on the visitor gown, and pushed open the door. There she was, so pale, so tiny under all the tubes and monitors. Her first groggy words, "Mom, you're here." "Yes, baby, I'm right here, never leaving." I took her hand, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat against mine, and something inside me shifted. All the excuses I'd made for my family, they vanished. No more. The betrayal was sharper than any fear I'd felt. The next 3 days were this blur of machines, schedules, and small victories. Her first sip of water, sitting up with nurse help, her face pale, pain etched into every expression. Through it all, I was her rock, nurse, cheerleader, hand holder. I slept in that lumpy vinyl recliner, surviving on vending machine crackers and lukewarm coffee. My phone, the silent witness, remained untouched by anyone from my family. The group chat message from the moment she was out of surgery stared back at me, read but ignored by Mom, Dad, and Colin. Not a word. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, Sophie slept peacefully for the first time. I rubbed circulation back into my legs and my phone buzzed, hopeful instantly. "Dad, a text about family help." I opened it. They wanted me to contribute $5,000 to my brother's engagement party. I stared at my sleeping daughter, the exhaustion, the fear, the sheer absurdity. And then I laughed. Not a warm laugh, cold, dry, humorless. And in that laughter, the weight of betrayal became clarity, and clarity became action. But for now, all I did was sit with Sophie, feel her breathe, and let the silence of the hospital be ours alone. It was a strange, exhausting, beautiful kind of hell, and I wouldn't have traded a second of being there with her for anything. So there I was, exhausted beyond words, sitting next to Sophie as she finally slept, the beeping of the heart monitor filling the quiet room. My phone buzzed, and I grabbed it, heart doing that stupid hopeful flip. It was Dad. I opened the message, and, okay, wait, you're not going to believe this. He wanted me to contribute $5,000 for Colin's engagement party. $5,000 right after my daughter had spent 13 hours under the knife. Not a single check-in, not a call, not a text from anyone while she was literally fighting for her life. And now this? I just stared, my mind spinning. Disbelief hit first. I read the message over and over. The words blurred. Something about a deposit, some all-inclusive Bali package, networking, Isabel's clients. And there it was. Plain as day. They expected me to just, I don't know, hand over $5,000. After what? After everything. My stomach churned. The fatigue from the waiting room, from holding Sophie's hand, from sitting in that beige chair for hours turned to a sharp, icy rage. How could they even think, that this was reasonable, that this was normal, that they could just skip the last 3 days of my life, ignore the trauma, and text me a bill? And here's the thing, right? I realized something then. This wasn't just thoughtlessness, it was pattern, a rhythm that had been there forever. My parents, Colin, they all relied on me, always me. I provided, I covered, I smoothed, I paid. Colin, the golden child, drifting through life with charm and accidents and failed ventures, always patched up by me. Mom and Dad, the absentee managers of their own lives, quietly delegating every responsibility to me. And now, in the midst of the worst day of my life, they sent a text asking for thousands. That clarity hit like a hammer. This wasn't about a party. This was about expectation, entitlement. Their entire sense of family dynamics built on me being the quiet bank. Anger bubbled up, but oddly, it was controlled, almost cold. I felt the sharp clarity settle in, not the hot, screaming, irrational anger. No, this was precise. This was understanding. They had miscalculated. They thought I would cave. They assumed I'd continue to provide. That assumption, that blind certainty, was their mistake. I could see it so clearly. Sitting there in the dim light of the hospital room, Sophie sleeping peacefully beside me, oblivious to the adult chaos swirling just a few feet away in the form of text messages and entitlement. And I laughed, but it wasn't a laugh that felt like joy. It was a dry, humorless laugh, the kind that surprises even you. This was the sound of someone finally seeing the situation for what it was and realizing, okay, yeah, I am done. This is not just annoyance. This is a revelation. The inequity, the silent expectation, the total lack of empathy, it all became tangible. The whole picture was snapped into focus. Sophie's surgery, my emotional labor, my sleepless vigilance, all invisible. Their lives untouched, their priorities intact, and somehow I was still expected to foot the bill for their celebration. It was absurd, and yet it was always like this. I put the phone down for a moment, just to breathe, to really take it in. And in that pause, a strange sense of empowerment crept in. Because for the first time, I could see the system for what it was. I could see the leverage I had, the control I'd never exercised, the miscalculation they had made. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just the exhausted, alone mom in a beige chair anymore. I was the one with the passwords, the finances, the ability to say no. And in that quiet, tense, exhausted moment, I decided I'm not just going to refuse. I'm going to recalibrate. I'm going to shift the balance. The next steps were already forming in my mind, precise and cold. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of clarity mixed with righteous indignation. They had underestimated me. And that, was about to change. Okay, so after that insane text from Dad asking for $5,000, I sat there with Sophie asleep beside me, feeling this weird mix of exhaustion and this icy, precise anger. It wasn't the kind of anger that makes you yell or throw things. No, it was methodical and strategic. Like, okay, they've made their move. Now it's my turn. And here's the thing. I had the power, all of it, every account, every password, every service. Every little piece of their convenience ran through me. They just assumed it would always be like that. Well, not anymore. I started with the phone plan. Colin's precious influencer number, the one he bragged about, all his little connections, it was on me. I didn't just cancel it. That would be too easy. No, I ported it, transferred it to a pay-as-you-go provider, created a new account under his name, put on the cheapest plan they had, 1 gigabyte of data, a $10 credit to start. That was it. One text could reach him if he really needed to. And then, bam, his precious phone. His problem now. I could almost hear his panic if he realized it. And honestly, I smiled at the thought. Next, the family emergency credit card. The one they all used like it was unlimited, even though it was technically for emergencies. I logged in, checked the balance, felt my stomach twist, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was satisfaction. Authorized users removed. Robert, Diane, Colin all gone. Click, click, click. Paid off the balance from my own account to make it neat. Closed it. A final, bitter severance payment. The pop-up asked, "Are you sure?" And I whispered to Sophie, still sleeping, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. It felt like setting fire to a chain that had bound me for decades. I was done being the safety net. Utilities were next. Condo utilities all linked to my accounts. Autopay for power, gas, water, trash, cable, high-speed internet, all canceled. Each click carried a weight, a cold satisfaction. It was administrative, slow, deliberate, and delicious in its own way. I imagined their frustration when they realized the lights wouldn't turn on, the internet wouldn't work, the TV wouldn't load. And that's the thing, it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was clarity. It was justice in the quietest form. The kind that hits you with consequences before anyone even yells or cries. Streaming services, Amazon, Spotify, all under my name. They assumed access would never be questioned. Manage accounts, sign out devices, remove family members, delete payment methods, change passwords, one by one. I erased their ability to freeload. They had taken the digital world for granted. All those little conveniences, little luxuries, every assumed thing, they were illusions maintained by me, now gone. I became this ghost in their lives, invisible hands, undoing what they thought was permanent. And honestly, it felt good, it felt right while I worked. I kept glancing at Sophie, her tiny chest rising and falling, peaceful and unaware of the quiet storm I was unleashing. And I thought, I have always been the responsible one, always the one holding it together, covering up, paying for, fixing what wasn't mine to fix. And yet, in this moment, I was reclaiming that power, rewriting the rules, not out of pettiness, but because someone had to. And then there was Isabel. Isabel. I didn't know much at first, but something about her confidence, the way she navigated the family, the money, the charm it screamed calculated. I ran a quick background check, professional grade, nothing shady, just tools I had at my disposal. And wow, not a boutique consultant at all. 6 months in PR, a string of failed ventures, over $80,000 in debt, 2 civil judgments, the Bali deposit, not for a party, for her creditor. She had been using Colin and my family as a shield and as a bank. She identified me as the target within minutes. Brilliant, if it wasn't so infuriating. My mind raced through the next moves. Every account, every password, every system I touched had leverage. The 1-cent transfer to Colin's account, that was the probe, the test. Now, the purge. Cold, calculated, and undeniable. They had assumed I was a passive participant in their lives, a bank, a ghost who only appeared to pay bills and solve problems. They forgot one critical detail. I was aware. I held all the keys, and I was done playing that role. The digital purge wasn't just about control, it was education. They would have to learn the hard way how to handle even the simplest tasks themselves. And honestly, I had to stifle a laugh picturing the chaos, dad shouting at the TV, mom fumbling with account logins, Colin panicking about his phone, and me calm, cool, methodical, typing from the side of Sophie's bed while she slept. A sense of satisfaction settled in, crisp and icy. This was power, real power, and I was using it like a surgeon. Precise, no wasted energy, no emotion beyond clarity. I took a breath, glanced around the hospital room, and thought, okay, this is it. The 1 cent transfer was the opening salvo, the digital purge, first strike. And this wasn't about punishment, not entirely. It was about resetting the balance, teaching them a lesson about assumption, about entitlement, about the fact that they had spent decades taking me for granted. I had been their ghost, their safety net, their provider, and now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't. The weight of it all lifted in a strange, almost euphoric way. The clarity, the cold satisfaction, the realization that the power had always been mine. It was like breathing for the first time in years. By the time Sophie stirred, blinking groggily, unaware of the quiet storm I'd orchestrated, I sat back, hand on the mouse, and felt a sense of calm. The purge was done. The accounts, the services, the privileges, they were all mine to control. And for the first time, it felt like my life, my choices, and my energy were just that mine. Not a buffer for their chaos, not a free pass for entitlement, not an assumption of availability. Mine. And it was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly, wonderfully liberating. So after shutting down all the accounts and utilities, my mind kept circling back to Isabel. Something about her had felt off from the start. I mean, I had met her twice, and both times she was charming, polished, this whirlwind of confidence, but there was this underlying calculation. You know, like she was measuring everything, assessing every detail. So I decided to do what I do best: gather data, professional grade background check, nothing shady, just tools I actually had access to at work. And oh wow, the results were something else. Turns out, Isabel wasn't some boutique consultant with a cushy little gig. Nope. 6 months in PR, then a string of failed businesses, tons of debt, over $80,000 in personal debt, with 2 outstanding civil judgments. Wait, I thought that Bali deposit Dad and Mom were so excited about, not for a party at all. It was to cover a creditor who was breathing down her neck. Suddenly, it all clicked. Every little move she made with Colin, every nudge of my family, it wasn't charm or love, it was strategy. She had identified me as the primary target within minutes of meeting me and my family. Well, they were just collateral. And then it hit me. The clarity was almost shocking. They weren't just lazy or inattentive. No, they were being used. My parents and Colin had been manipulated. Every assumption they made about me being the provider, the one who handled money, logistics, emergencies, it had been exploited. Wait, this wasn't just unfair, it was a system they had been blind to for years. And Isabel, she wasn't just lucky, she was calculated. She'd spotted the pattern, understood the leverage, and deployed it perfectly. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process it all. My pulse was steady, surprisingly calm, and I felt this strange kind of exhilaration. Finally, I understood the landscape, the power dynamics, the family patterns, the dependencies. It was all laid out. And now I had the advantage. Every account I controlled, every password, every financial lever, I could use it, and I did. Suddenly, my earlier frustration, my exhaustion from those 13 hours in the hospital felt like fuel. Not rage exactly, but clarity. Cold, sharp, precise. I was no longer just reacting. I was planning, strategizing. I could see the path ahead. Isabel had underestimated me, and my family had been blind, trusting, oblivious. But now I had the information. I knew the leverage points, the weak spots, the precise places to assert control. It wasn't about revenge. Well, not entirely. It was about resetting the balance, showing them the consequences of assumption. Every step I'd taken during the digital purge had been about teaching them a lesson. But now it was reinforced by knowledge Isabel's desperation. Her debts, the way she had orchestrated everything around Colin and my family, that knowledge gave me a sense of power that was almost intoxicating, honestly. And as I sat there, glancing at Sophie sleeping peacefully, I realized something else. This clarity wasn't just about strategy, it was about freedom, understanding what had been happening, seeing it clearly for the first time, gave me a kind of emotional leverage too. I wasn't helpless, I wasn't a victim, I had insight, control, and the ability to act. And yeah, there was a little thrill in knowing that while Isabel had thought she was orchestrating everything, she hadn't factored in one crucial thing. Me, the one who sees, the one who calculates, the one who acts with precision. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was in control, and it felt amazing. The first confrontation came from Mom. My phone had been buzzing like crazy on the bedside table, 17 missed calls and a flood of texts. I ignored it at first, letting Sophie rest. But eventually, I pressed answer. Her voice came through, shrill and panicked. Alexandra, what's going on? I stayed calm, the same controlled tone I use at work when presenting to a board. Good morning, Mom. Everything is under control. The card's closed, the utilities canceled, accounts updated. The digital purge is complete. A pause, then her voice rose into near hysteria. You can't just do this. Robert is furious. Colin's phone is off. How could you act without telling us? I leaned back, almost casual. Robert can manage his own accounts. Colin can manage his phone now. You'll need to set up new logins if you want access to the services again. Her panic intensified. I don't know how. You've always done it. You've always handled everything. I raised an eyebrow. Yes, I have. And now you're going to learn I'm not your provider anymore. Mom, not the bank, not the technical support, not the safety net. That role has ended. Silence. Then quivering, desperate. You're abandoning us. You can't just do this. I laughed softly, dry and low. Abandoning, let's talk about abandonment. Sitting in that beige chair for 13 hours while Sophie was in surgery alone, waiting for a text that never came. That was abandonment. This is setting boundaries. You're on your own now. Call ended. Click. Next was Dad. He sent a long, rambling email that evening. I could almost hear him pacing, tapping the keys furiously. The email started with guilt. Your mother is beside herself. She hasn't stopped crying. Then indignation. I don't know what's gotten into you, Alexandra, but this behavior is childish. And ended with a threat. You are part of this family and have responsibilities. You can't just close accounts. I read it calmly, sipping my coffee. He was right about one thing, the condo. I was on the mortgage, but leverage, not where he thought. I typed a precise, clinical response. You're right, Dad, I am on the mortgage. I'll be contacting a real estate lawyer to discuss options for selling. Since I've been paying the mortgage and bills for 6 years, my equity is substantial. You and Mom should start looking for a rental. Sent. Instant silence. Then Colin. After 2 days of radio silence, the emails poured in, frantic, incoherent, demanding. Phone isn't working. Izzy is mad. Turn my card back on now. The tone shifted from panic to absurdity. You're insane. You're ruining everything. I leaned back, reading the chaos, imagining him at some cafe with weak Wi-Fi, his whole life unraveling in real time. And then came the in-person confrontation. Doorbell rang, Sophie sleeping. I knew. I could feel it. Colin and Isabel. I opened the door. Colin looked rumpled, furious. Isabel, icy calm, assessing everything around her. That smile, polite, venomous, calculating. Alexandra, she said, silk-smooth voice. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. We're all family here. You've been under stress with Sophie, but your actions are cruel. I crossed my arms. Oh, cruel? Or is this about money and control? Colin waved dismissively. Hope Sophie's okay. I nodded, ignoring him. Isabel pressed on. Colin and I have a future, and you're standing in the way. That $5,000 non-refundable deposit you cost us, that... I tilted my head, voice dripping with fake sympathy. Oh, you lost the Bali deposit, shame. 5,000 gone. Just like that. Colin yelled, red-faced. It's your fault, you owe us. I let the pause hang. Since you brought up the 5,000, Isabel, let's talk. The non-refundable deposit, or the civil judgment against you for $6,800, or the $12,400 you owe Capital One, because I checked the fine print. And look, numbers don't lie. Isabel's smile faltered, eyes dead. Colin looked confused. She's lying. Isabel snapped. She's jealous, trying to drive us apart. I pulled out the envelope, crisp manila, papers inside detailing her debts and judgments. Here you go. Colin, your fiancé, $82,000 in debt, civil judgments, and that Bali deposit, not for a party, to cover creditors. You've been manipulated. Isabel lost it, screaming, cursing, threatening to sue. Colin just stared, disbelief etched on his face. I stayed calm, flat, firm. Get out of my house. Now. Colin's face, red and stunned, slowly deflating. He muttered, couldn't form a coherent sentence. He left, door ajar. Isabel stormed out, slamming the door. A picture fell off the wall. I shut it, locked it. Quiet finally. Sophie stirred weakly. Mom, who was that yelling? I smiled, stroked her hair. Just your uncle, sweetie. He won't be bothering us anymore. The aftermath was administrative and slow. Dad tried lawyers, condo sold, equity returned to me. Mom got a part-time receptionist job. Dad had to manage finances. Colin, cut off from me and his usual crutches, moved in with parents, got a job at a hardware store, and slowly learned responsibility. And me, calm, satisfied, finally free from constant anxiety, watching the balance reset, boundaries enforced, and life settling into peace. After the confrontations and the purge, things started to shift slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The condo, the one I had co-signed and quietly managed for years, was sold. The market was good, thankfully, so my equity was returned, and their small share barely made a dent. Watching it all unfold from the sidelines, I felt this surprising, quiet relief. It wasn't about gloating or revenge, it was just, finally, freedom. Freedom from being the invisible provider, the fixer, the one responsible for everyone else's chaos. Mom had to take a part-time receptionist job at a dental office. A small step, sure. But it was something I'd never seen before, her figuring out income on her own, learning the rhythms of accountability outside the safety net I'd always provided. Dad had to relearn how to manage his finances, something that had been laughably neglected for decades. I watched him struggle with bills, statements, passwords, and it was almost like watching children learn arithmetic for the first time. Awkward, fumbling, but ultimately necessary. And it struck me I had been shielding them, yes, but also denying them the chance to actually be responsible adults. Colin, well, Colin's wake-up call was slower, a little messier, cut off from my resources, stripped of access to the emergency card, the phone plan, and the constant invisible support. He had nowhere to hide. The first week was rough. emails, texts, frantic calls. He didn't know how to manage anything. And honestly, it was a little satisfying to watch him wrestle with his own life for once. Eventually, he found a job at a big box hardware store. I saw him months later, pushing a line of shopping carts in the rain, head down. He saw me, looked away immediately. No shameful excuses, no bluster, just a quiet, red-faced acceptance. And I felt nothing, not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction, just relief that the system had reset itself. Life around me felt lighter. The constant, low-level anxiety that had dogged me for years, the sound of my phone buzzing, waiting for some new emergency or demand was gone. I no longer had to anticipate the next financial catastrophe or emotional plea. Bills that had been endless lines on my spreadsheet, mom and dad's condo, Colin's slush fund, the family mishaps were now gone or self-managed. I could breathe. It wasn't just money, it was energy, emotional bandwidth, mental space that I had never fully realized I'd been lacking. I spent more time with Sophie, now recovering, slowly regaining her strength, the simple joy of being present, of watching her sit up on her own, laugh, and eat without the shadow of family crises looming over us. It was profound. There were no distractions, no obligations beyond what we truly wanted. My focus was finally ours, just us, building our life without constant interference, constant demands, and there was something else, something I hadn't expected. Watching the family adjust, seeing them fumble, struggle, and actually learn responsibility, it was strangely satisfying, not cruelly, but as a kind of acknowledgement that balance had been restored. They could no longer lean on me indefinitely. And for the first time, they were encountering the consequences of their own choices. It was life, raw and unfiltered, and I could observe without fear, guilt, or resentment. In that quiet, reflective space, I realized the depth of what had shifted. I wasn't just free from financial burden. I was free from the emotional labor of managing their lives, from the invisible, never-ending safety net I'd been. And with that freedom came clarity and peace. I could make decisions for myself and Sophie without compromise, without the weight of unearned responsibility. Our life, our choices, our recovery, it was finally ours. And in that calm, reflective observation, I felt a deep, profound sense of liberation, the kind that comes after years of carrying what was never truly yours to carry. After all the chaos, the confrontations, the financial battles, life finally started to feel light. For the first time in years, Sophie and I could breathe without the constant shadow of family emergencies looming over us. We could plan our own days, make choices without checking if someone else would yell, beg, or demand money. And honestly, it was glorious. It's a strange kind of freedom, one you don't fully appreciate until you've been trapped in someone else's version of life for decades. One of the first things we did, just the two of us, was plan a trip to Italy. I had been putting it off for years, always thinking there would be another time, another opportunity, another excuse. But now, with Sophie healed, stronger than ever, it felt like the perfect moment. I opened my laptop, pulled up flights to Rome, and watched her face light up, truly light up. Not just a polite smile, but pure joy. "Mom, are you serious?" she asked, eyes wide. "Completely serious," I said, showing her the new credit card I had just opened for the trip. No strings, no conditions, just our adventure. Her excitement was contagious, and for a moment, I let myself feel a rush of happiness I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Landing in Rome was surreal. The air was warm, the sun hitting the cobblestone streets, the sound of scooters buzzing past, the smell of fresh bread and espresso, it was intoxicating. Sophie, taller now, laughing, taking pictures of every stray cat she saw, every fountain, every statue, and I followed in camera in hand, heart full. We wandered through the Colosseum, imagining the gladiators, imagining history beneath our feet, and I felt a deep, almost overwhelming sense of peace. The betrayal, the exhaustion, the stress of those months, it all seemed distant, like a shadow we had left behind. We explored the streets aimlessly, savoring gelato from tiny shops tucked into alleyways, stopping at cafes for cappuccinos, just watching people live their lives. And, it struck me how light everything felt without the weight of other people's expectations. Sophie's laughter echoed down the streets, and I laughed too, freely, genuinely. I realized how much of my previous life had been dictated by other people's needs, by their sense of entitlement, and now it was just us, just freedom, just choice. Every evening, we returned to our little apartment, unpacking souvenirs, recounting the day's adventures. Sophie would curl up, pointing out her favorite moments, and I would listen, smile, sometimes just sit quietly, letting her excitement fill the room. There were no interruptions, no demands, no obligations beyond our happiness. And slowly, the physical reminders of her surgery faded too. Her spine was strong, her posture proud and straight, her energy returning in full force. Watching her reclaim her strength, her joy, felt like a personal victory. It wasn't just about her health, it was about reclaiming the part of my life that had been drained by constant, unearned responsibility. We also spent long afternoons just wandering through piazzas, reading menus in Italian, stumbling through phrases, laughing when we butchered pronunciation. It was intimate, bonding, healing. Every misstep, every mispronounced word, every wrong turn became a memory. A story we would tell each other later, laughing until our stomachs hurt. And in these moments, I felt empowered, almost like reclaiming myself piece by piece. I wasn't just a parent or a provider. I was a companion, a guide, a human experiencing life alongside my daughter, not as a buffer for someone else's mistakes. One day, sitting on the Spanish steps, Sophie nudged me. "Mom, I can't believe we're here. I feel free, like really free." I smiled, taking her hand, squeezing it gently. "Me too, baby, me too. We've earned this, every step, every choice. It's ours." And in that moment, it wasn't just the trip that mattered, it was the journey that had brought us here. The months of struggle, the betrayals, the confrontations, they were all part of the story. But they no longer dictated our happiness. As the sun set over Rome, casting golden light across the rooftops and piazzas, I looked at Sophie, watching her face glow with excitement and contentment. I realized something fundamental. I had reclaimed not just my life, but my energy, my freedom, my agency. The weight of others' entitlement, manipulation, and expectations had been lifted. And in that space, we found peace, joy, and the simple, profound pleasure of being together, truly together, on our terms. We returned home months later, transformed not just by the trip, but by the clarity and freedom we had cultivated. Sophie's laughter filled the kitchen as we unpacked souvenirs, and I watched her, taller, stronger, healthier, and I felt this deep, unwavering sense of pride. Life was no longer dictated by others' needs, it was ours, and that truly, completely was priceless. Finally, the betrayal, the weight, the exhaustion, they were all behind us, replaced with the lightness of freedom, the thrill of choice, and the joy of simply living, fully together. And that's our story. It's wild, emotional, and honestly, a bit empowering, reminding us that setting boundaries and reclaiming control can completely change your life. Sometimes, the hardest decisions lead to the greatest freedom. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand your ground like this? Drop a comment, share your story. And if you want to see more journeys like this, hit subscribe. Life's too short not to take control, right?